Alright, moving on. Temple of Artemis is another T1 wonder. It's right at the beginning of the game. It provides 10% growth in all cities and 15% production when building a ranged unit out of the city that it was built in. It also has a great engineer point and a culture point in as part of that, well, culture per turn, one culture per turn as part of that wonder. Temple of Artemis is amazing. We've already talked about why Hanging Gardens is so good, that early growth is important. Temple of Artemis is essentially at 60 food. It has the same growth as Hanging Gardens. Temple of Artemis is one of, I think, two things in the game that basically is total growth as opposed to excess growth. So there's a pantheon, I forget what it's called, that gives you 10% growth across your cities, and that is not equivalent to the Temple of Artemis bonus here, because most of the food modifiers in Civ, the percentage food modifiers, are after. That's their excess food. So if your city eats 8 food and you have 10 total food generation in your city, most of those modifiers only affect the 2 remaining food. Temple of Artemis affects the base food. So if you have 8 food in your city, if you have 10 food in your city and your citizens are eating 8 of it, it still modifies the 10 food, not the 2 remaining food, which means this bonus is better than it looks on paper. Additionally, it's very, very early. You probably won't get it as soon as you open archery, because building a wonder at this stage in the game, this early, is a little too high on the opportunity cost in general, but you will get this very, very early. And that means 10% growth in all of your cities across your empire above and beyond what other players have. And at 60 food, it's actually better than, I just said this, but it's better even in your capital city. As soon as you reach 60 food, it's better than Hanging Gardens. Amazing wonder. Also, it has an engineer point, and that's not to be downplayed, whereas generating a merchant early is always detrimental because a scientist or an engineer are just better than a merchant. There's some toss-up between engineers and scientists very, very early. I'd still probably prefer scientist points instead of engineer points, but it is not a bad thing if you have 2 or 3 early wonders in the game that generate engineer points and you get an early engineer. That may mean grabbing a growth wonder such as Notre Dame before anyone else can, or grabbing Machu Picchu, or it may mean planting an engineer, which is quite a large amount of production early to have that manufacturing taken care of. So Temple of Artemis very, very strong. And then of course there's the 15% production when building ranged units. It's likely that you will be building ranged units throughout the game. Ranged units are, up until basically the modern era, are the premier type of fighting unit. They're the unit that is going to be doing the most work throughout definitely the ancient, classical, and medieval, likely through the Renaissance and into a little bit less so in industrial and modern. But for a long period of time, ranged units are the military unit that really matters. So you're going to be producing military units, so that production bonus, of course, very, very nice. But really what it is about Temple of Artemis is the growth. And it's because it's so early and it affects your entire empire that makes that so nice. Alright, that's it for my T1 wonders. Those 10 were the ones that I consider the best wonders in the game, all things equal. Now, some of my acute listeners here are going to be thinking, what about Petra? And I'm going to get to Petra, but I'll talk about why I don't consider that a T1 wonder, even though it's likely the best wonder in the game, tied with Alhambra in my mind for what is the absolute best wonder, and possibly better than Alhambra, but it's the situational element that's going to limit Petra. So we'll get to that in a minute.